So what happens when an entire industry operates on, just unearned public trust? Today on our deep dive, we're opening up this really remarkable investigative article. It's accompanied by a pretty extensive forensic dossier, and it's titled, You Don't Need a Conspiracy When Everyone Already Trusts You.
Right.
And we're going to examine a really profound structural paradox in the American adoption system. We'll trace 4 completely separate actors. So there's a funder sitting on a charity board. There's a senator cashing in twice, a governor rerouting state money, and a presidential campaign that just kind of borrows an excuse.
I mean, borrowing the halo, basically.
Exactly. And our mission today is to figure out how powerful individuals extract immense value from the adoption sector without any kind of coordinated conspiracy. They rely entirely on what the author calls this architecture of silence.
Right. And the premise we have to establish right off the top is that this investigation is not about, villains in a smoke-filled room.
Right. No secret handshakes.
No, exactly. The dossier we're looking at, it basically proves that these 4 actors didn't coordinate.
Yeah.
They didn't even need to know the others existed, really.
Oh.
They were simply tapping into this massive, heavily capitalized system that operates with really fragmented oversight.
Which is, this is where it gets deeply personal for me. Because as an adoptee, I was raised with a very specific narrative, You're told your separation from your first family is this rescue story. It's an inherently good, almost, divinely orchestrated event. And as a listener, even if you have absolutely no connection to adoption, you probably assume that's true too.
Sure, because society tells us it's true. It's ingrained.
Exactly. But then you grow up and you start looking at the actual paperwork. You realize that what was sold to you as, good and necessary, it was actually underwritten by this completely unaccountable infrastructure. And you assume there must be a singular bad actor pulling the strings. But what this dossier reveals is, I think it's far more unsettling for all of us, which is that it's an entirely legal system running on unquestioned trust.
Yeah. And to understand how that legal system actually functions, we have to look at the intersection of private money and institutional governance.
Okay.
The dossier begins with the largest private agency in the sector, which is Bethany Christian Services.
Right.
And if we pull their fiscal year 2024 financials straight from their IRS form, 990 filings, they reported $142 million in revenue.
Wow.
And over $40 million in assets.
Okay, I want to stop and underline that number, $142 million. Because I think when people hear adoption agency, they picture, like a community center, right? Or a couple of social workers in a church basement.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a critical misconception that the author points out. $142 million operating budget means we are looking at a sprawling, highly capitalized enterprise.
Right.
They are handling interstate logistics. They're deploying massive marketing campaigns, targeting crisis pregnancies, maintaining extensive legal counsel, managing thousands of employees.
It's corporate.
It is an industry titan. It really is. And the dossier's first major finding centers on how that titan is funded and governed, specifically focusing on Marie DeVos.
Ah, okay. The DeVos family, obviously the prominent billionaire donors.
Yes, exactly. So between 1998 and 2016, the DeVos family foundations poured a confirmed $6 million into Bethany.
Okay.
Additionally, there's the Douglas and Maria DeVos Foundation. They contributed over $800,000. And then an allied foundation, the Van Andel Foundation, added more. So we are looking at well over $7 million flowing into this single agency from one allied philanthropic block.
Which is just a massive concentration of capital. But, to play devil's advocate, big donations happen in the nonprofit world all the time.
They do, yeah. But the forensic analysis here, it points to the proximity of that money to the agency's actual oversight. Right. Marie DeVos was not just writing checks from the outside. She sat on Bethany's own governing board.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. She was inside the room where the legal and operational oversight of the agency takes place, while simultaneously representing the family that overwhelmingly funds the entire operation.
Okay, let's unpack this because, wait, I need to stop you. Are you telling me there is literally no legal boundary preventing that in child welfare?
None.
Because if we were talking about, say, a publicly traded company, the SEC would be swarming that boardroom.
Poisonly.
Right. And the auditor would flag it as a massive conflict of interest. It's like hiring a building inspector who is entirely funded by the construction company.
That is a perfect analogy, and I know it sounds wild, but no. The laws governing 501c3 nonprofits in the United States, they do not fundamentally prohibit a major donor from sitting on the board.
That is great.
We societally assume nonprofit boards are independent watchdogs, right? But legally, there is no federal mandate separating the money from the governance.
Wow.
And, it happens in the arts, it happens in higher education. But when you apply that lack of regulation to the child welfare sector, an industry that has the absolute power to decide which families are permanently separated and which are created, the vulnerabilities are just magnified exponentially.
Because the mission of the institution inevitably shifts, doesn't it? If your board is beholden to a single major funder, the primary drive of the agency morphs from, child welfare into institutional preservation.
Exactly.
You align with the ideology of the money to keep the lights on.
And the dossier doesn't just theorize about this happening. It actually provides 3 chilling, very distinct examples of what that compromised oversight looks like in practice at Bethany.
Let's hear them.
So the most glaring one is the whiplash of their LGBTQ placement policies over less than a decade.
Oh, I remember this making the news.
Yeah, it was very public. So prior to 2019, Bethany explicitly excluded same-sex couples from fostering or adopting. But then 2 couples sued the state of Michigan after being turned away by state-contracted agencies.
So the state gets involved, which obviously threatens the agency's government contract.
Exactly. The money is threatened.
Mm-hmm.
So under direct legal settlement pressure from the Michigan Attorney General in April 2019, Bethany's board reluctantly reversed their exclusionary policy. But, and this is key, only for the state of Michigan.
Oh, wow. So just a localized fix?
Right. They did the absolute legal bare minimum to protect their state funding in Michigan. But fast forward to March 2021, and they finally extended that reversal nationally. And publicly, they framed it as this, principle-driven decision about inclusion.
But the dossier tracks another reversal, doesn't it? Because I feel like that wasn't the end of the story.
It wasn't. In June 2026, the board voted to reverse the policy again, effective June 2027, locking same-sex couples out nationwide once more.
You're kidding.
No. And the CEO claimed this latest shift wasn't driven by donor pressure. But the author of the dossier notes that claim really has to be read against the documented timeline we just talked about.
Right, because when your primary oversight is also your primary funding source, policy just becomes a pendulum, swinging to whatever demographic the board currently favors.
Exactly.
And I have to say, just as an adoptee, watching an agency treat marginalized prospective parents like policy yo-yos, it's horrifying.
Yeah.
It validates this, this subsonic vibration we feel our entire lives, this deep-seated knowledge that the system prioritizes its own institutional preservation over the actual permanence and well-being of children.
Right.
Because a child's placement shouldn't depend on which way the donor wind is blowing in a given fiscal year.
No, it's a fundamental breakdown of the fiduciary duty to the child. And that lack of independent, rigid oversight, it bleeds directly into operational practices on the ground, too.
How so?
Well, the dossier highlights the 2017 case of Alex Robinson in Muskegon, Michigan. She was a 17-year-old mother who had just given birth.
Okay.
And within hours of the birth, a Bethany representative arrived at her hospital bedside with adoption paperwork.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Robinson eventually had to engage in a protracted court dispute just to regain custody of her own child.
Just sit with the mechanics of that for a second. Hospital bedside paperwork for a teenager who was recovering from childbirth?
Literally hours after.
In any other medical or legal context, that would be flagged immediately as coercive.
Right.
Like, if someone came to your bedside to get you to sign over the deed to your house while you were on painkillers, it would be a massive scandal.
Absolutely. It would be predatory.
But because it has the halo of adoption over it, it's treated as routine service delivery. Nobody questions the goodness of the act.
And the blinders created by that halo, they applied to basic financial hygiene as well, which is the third example. The dossier details the case of Rhonda Eastham, who was an office manager for Bethany in the Memphis area.
Okay.
Between 2010 and 2015, she embezzled over $130,000 from the agency.
Wait, a local office manager?
Yes, and it went undetected for years until she was finally indicted in 2018.
Wow. So you have ideological whiplash at the highest levels, you have alleged coercive practices at the hospital bedside for a minor, and outright multi-year embezzlement happening in the back office.
Yep.
And all of it flourishes because the people funding the agency are the ones sitting on the board overseeing it. The inherent, goodness of the adoption narrative is working as a literal shield. It's hiding a highly capitalized, totally undersupervised infrastructure.
Which really transitions us perfectly into the second layer of this investigation.
Okay.
Because boardroom power, it has a ceiling. Private trust can only get you so far.
Right. Eventually, you need actual laws written.
Exactly. You need laws written, and you need state budgets allocated.
Yeah.
So to see how private trust buys public law, we have to look at the political seams. And the dossier starts with former Senator Roy Blunt.
Okay, so we're moving from the philanthropic layer to the federal policy layer. How does Blunt connect to this architecture of silence?
Senator Blunt represents the structural bridge here. First, we have to understand the mechanics of the Congressional Coalition on Adoption Institute, or CCAI.
Okay.
This organization was founded in 2001 by the sitting Congressional Adoption Caucus. So it was essentially built by Congress, for Congress.
Okay, wait, so its stated purpose is what?
Its stated purpose is to shape how lawmakers receive information about adoption policy.
So it's an internal echo chamber. It is not an independent watchdog. It's not an academic research body. It's an advisory group created to inform the very people writing adoption law, operating completely under the banner of child welfare.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is that Senator Roy Blunt sat on CCAI's advisory board starting in 2009.
Okay.
But simultaneously, according to Federal Election Commission records, Blunt was receiving direct campaign donations from the DeVos family.
The same family funding Bethany.
The very same. Furthermore, back in 2004, the DeVos family's PAC, which was called All Children Matter, they funded independent expenditure advertising that helped elect Blunt or son, Matt Blunt, into the Missouri governor's mansion.
Wait. We have two generations of Blunts heavily backed by one family's money, and the senator is sitting inside the specific body meant to advise Congress on adoption law.
Yes.
But none of this is hidden in a vault, right? I mean,
No.
Pixie money, FEC records, this is all public record.
It is entirely public. And that is where the dossier explains the mechanics of bureaucratic siloing.
Okay.
The author makes a really crucial distinction between disclosure and oversight.
Right.
The Federal Election Commission, the FEC, they track the DeVos campaign donations, but their mandate is election fairness. The Missouri Ethics Commission tracks the paid money that went to Matt Blunt, and the CCAI tracks its own advisory board rosters. They are all fully disclosed.
But they're separate.
Exactly. Because they exist in completely separate administrative silos, the conflict of interest hides in plain sight.
It's like a bank vault secured by 4 different guards.
I like that, yeah.
Right, like Guard A only checks your shoes, Guard B only checks your hat, Guard C only checks your briefcase. If you wear the right hat, Guard B lets you through, and he never talks to Guard C to see what's actually in the briefcase. The system doesn't fail because it's malicious or secretive.
Right.
It fails because the guards are looking at entirely different things, and they have absolutely no mandate to talk to each other.
That is exactly how the machinery of the government works here. The IRS mandate is tax exemption. The FEC mandate is campaign finance. Neither agency is mandated to look at the holistic ethical picture of a child welfare advisory board.
Right.
As the article states, and it's a great quote, a conflict of interest you can Google is still a conflict of interest.
Oh, that's good.
Right. Just because you declare that you're taking money from the largest funder of the largest private adoption agency while simultaneously advising Congress on adoption law, that doesn't neutralize the conflict.
Yeah.
It just means you filed the right paperwork.
Wow. And this raises a massive question for the listener, whether you are connected to adoption or not. If fragmented paperwork allows political actors to launder their policy goals through a child welfare credential at the federal level, how does this play out at the state level?
Yeah, it looks a bit different.
Right, like what happens when there aren't direct campaign donations tying the actors together?
That brings us to our third actor, former Indiana Governor Mike Pence.
Okay, Pence.
With Pence, the dossier shows a completely different mechanism of policy capture. There's no board seat here, there's no campaign donation, no personal financial pie outlined in the text at all.
So how does he fit in?
Instead, Pence used the ordinary, completely legal machinery of his public office. As governor, he utilized the state budget process to redirect Indiana state funds toward an organization called Real Alternatives.
Let's explain what real alternatives is, because I assume the subcontracting chain here is vital to the story.
It's the whole story. Real Alternatives is an umbrella organization for crisis pregnancy centers. Now, they don't typically provide medical care. Their primary goal is to dissuade people from seeking abortions.
Right.
Governor Pence took state block grants and funneled them into Real Alternatives. Real Alternatives then turned around and subcontracted with Bethany Christian Services.
Ah. So the state authority and public tax dollars are redirected into a subcontracting chain that feeds right back into the exact same private adoption pipeline we've been talking about.
Precisely. Pence didn't need to coordinate with Roy Blunt or Maria DeVos.
They don't even need to be in the same room.
Never. The system is so fragmented, and the inherent trust in the word adoption is so absolute that politicians can simply utilize the systemic pipelines available to them.
Right.
They spend the public's unearned trust in adoption to achieve their own distinct ideological or political goals entirely independent of one another.
It's wild. But what happens when someone with absolutely zero connection to the child welfare sector needs a shield?
Yeah, the outsiders.
Right. We've seen how funders and politicians who are actually involved in the system use it. But what happens when you just need the ultimate cover story to get out of a crisis?
And that brings us to the fourth and final actor in the dossier, and honestly, perhaps the most bizarre piece of this whole puzzle, Donald Trump Jr. and the 2016 Trump Tower meeting.
Yeah, this is a story most people remember from the news, the Russia investigation, but seeing it laid out in this forensic, mechanical context completely changes how you view it.
It really does.
Walk us through the timeline of what actually happened in that room.
Sure. So in June 2016, Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and Paul Manafort met at Trump Tower with a Russian lawyer named Natalia Veselnitskaya.
Right.
The Trump team took the meeting because they were explicitly told she was bringing damaging opposition research on Hillary Clinton.
But the political dirt never materialized.
No, it didn't. Instead, Veselnitskaya used the meeting to raise the issue of the Magnitsky Act.
Okay, we need to take a second to explain the geopolitical tension here, because it's crucial for listeners who might not remember 2012 policy.
Yes, deep context. So the Magnitsky Act was a U.S. law passed in 2012 that sanctioned Russian officials responsible for human rights abuses. Specifically, it was named after the death of a Russian tax accountant named Sergei Magnitsky, who uncovered massive state fraud and subsequently died in a Moscow prison.
So the U.S. freezes the assets of these Russian oligarchs. Putin is obviously furious and needs asymmetric retaliation.
Exactly. Putin knows he can't hurt the U.S. economically in the same way the sanctions hurt his oligarchs.
Yeah.
So in December 2012, Russia passed the Yakovlev Law.
And what did that do?
It completely banned the U.S. adoption of Russian children.
Wow.
He used orphans as geopolitical leverage because he knew it would hit an emotional nerve in America, and it was a massive piece of congressional business at the time. In fact, the dossier notes that Senator Roy Blunt himself had introduced a Senate resolution in January 2013 urging Russia to reverse that very adoption ban.
So it was a very real, very live policy fight. But how does this connect to Trump Jr., a full year after the Trump Tower meeting?
So jump forward to July 2017. The press has finally caught wind of the 2016 Trump Tower meeting, and they're about to break the story that the Trump campaign met with a Russian operative.
Right, the panic sets in.
Trump Jr. needs an alibi, fast. He releases a public statement, which, by the way, the Washington Post later reported was dictated by Donald Trump himself, claiming that the meeting was primarily about a humanitarian adoption program.
He literally uses the Russian adoption ban as his invisibility cloak.
Yes. Now, Trump Jr. had to walk that statement back within days once his own email surfaced, showing he took the meeting expecting political dirt. But the initial reflex is what matters for this investigation.
And I want to make an incredibly important, completely impartial systemic point here, because based purely on the forensic facts in this dossier, there is absolute zero evidence that Trump Jr. or anyone on his team had any ties to CCAI, to Senator Blunt, to the DeVos family, or to Bethany Christian Services. None.
That is exactly the point the author is making. It is a bounded finding. Trump Jr. had never sat on a single adoption board. He didn't know these other actors.
Yeah.
There's no network link here, only a topical overlap.
And he didn't need to know them, because here's where it gets really interesting. The word adoption is so preloaded with unquestionable goodness that it just functions as a public utility. It is a resource that anyone can pick up, use to avoid scrutiny, and then set back down. When you are caught in a room with a foreign operative and you need a cover story, you reach for the most unimpeachable, wholesome subject you can think of. Because, as the author writes, who checks the register on a rescue story?
It's brilliant in a dark way. It proves that the reputational capital of adoption is entirely portable. You don't have to be invested in the sector to spend its trust. It's a masterclass in exploiting the architecture of silence.
It is deeply cynical. And as an adoptee, hearing your lived experience reduced to a PR shield for a political crisis,
Yeah,
it is a vibration you feel in your teeth.
I can imagine.
It really means your life, your family separation, is viewed by the powerful not as a human reality, but as a utility, as a free pass. And if you are a non-adoptee listening to this, you should be terrified by how easily public trust can be weaponized to bypass accountability.
Absolutely. Because if we connect all four of these actors, right, Maria DeVos, Roy Blunt, Mike Pence, and Donald Trump Jr., we see the full picture of the architecture.
For completely different people.
For completely different people, for completely different tools. You have a board seat, a donation trail, a redirected budget line, and a lie about a meeting.
And no conspiracy.
No conspiracy at all.
Which brings us to, I think, the post-tragic turn of this deep dive. Because knowing all of this, seeing the actual mechanics of this architecture laid bare, the immediate human instinct is to fall into pure, dark cynicism.
Oh, for sure. Throw up your hands.
Right, to say the game is rigged, nothing matters, why bother? But the article insists we go somewhere else, it demands reconstruction.
It refuses the conspiracy theory entirely. And this is where the forensic method really shines. The dossier places equal weight on its negative findings.
Let's explain the mechanics of a negative finding, because that feels like a crucial part of not falling into despair. Why is proving what isn't there so important?
A negative finding is a deliberate investigative check that yields no connection.
Okay.
For example, the investigator checked multiple years of board rosters for the National Council for Adoption, or NCFA. They're the industry's main trade association. They cross-referenced it with Bethany's leadership and found zero direct personnel overlap.
Wow.
Another negative finding. The donor identities for the CCAI remain unestablished. There's no secret smoking gun document there.
So the author didn't force a connection where one didn't exist just to make a sexier story?
Exactly. The temptation is to call four unconnected facts a secret cabal because, honestly, a conspiracy is so much more satisfying.
It gives you a villain to defeat.
Yes. But the negative findings prove the system isn't a secret cabal. The silence holds not through some masterful, shadowy concealment, but through the much cheaper trick of the system simply never being assembled for a macro view.
The four guards in the bank vault never talking to each other.
Precisely.
And this is where we claim agency. This is the post-tragic shift for us. We can acknowledge the profound harm of this system. The LGBTQ couples turned away, the 17-year-old mothers coerced at bedside, the adoptees used as political shields. We can acknowledge all of that without despairing.
Right.
Because if the system relies on isolated data to maintain its silence, then the simple act of cross-referencing is the act of dismantling the silence.
Yes. The agency isn't in catching villains. It is in building the oversight that doesn't exist. And the article highlights specific, highly actionable, albeit unglamorous, remedies to close these vulnerabilities.
Let's get into the mechanics of those solutions. What are the actual wrenches we can throw into this machinery?
Okay, first, regulators can simply be mandated to cross-reference filings. State attorneys general or the IRS could institute automated checks.
So it's not even a manual slog anymore.
Right. If the IRS is looking at a nonprofit's 990 form, the system should automatically cross-reference the board of directors against major foundation funding. If a massive conflict exists, it gets flagged before tax-exempt status is renewed.
That makes so much sense.
Second, nonprofits themselves can write their own board bylaws to explicitly bar major funders from holding governance seats. You legally separate the money from the oversight at the foundational level.
Which seems like nonprofit 101, but clearly, as we've seen with Bethany, it isn't happening.
Right. And third, on a cultural level, journalists can be trained to instinctively ask the second question whenever the humanitarian adoption shield is raised.
Yes.
When a politician says, "We were just talking about adoption," the press shouldn't just nod and walk away because it sounds nice. They need to ask for the receipts. They need to ask which agencies, which policies, and who exactly is funding them.
Don't just accept the halo.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean for us, for the listener, for the adoptee, for the citizen? I think it means that claiming agency involves taking this free resource away from the people exploiting it. The unearned trust in adoption is a currency.
Hmm.
And forensics, cross-referencing, demanding strict bylaws, that is the work of devaluing that currency for bad actors. It is slower than outrage. Outrage burns hot and fades fast. But structural reform outlasts outrage.
It's the difference between yelling at a broken foundation and methodically pouring new concrete.
I love that. Well, we have covered a massive amount of ground today, from the mechanics of bureaucratic siloing to the geopolitics of the Magnitsky Act. I strongly encourage our listeners to seek out and read the full essay, You Don't Need a Conspiracy When Everyone Already Trusts You.
It's definitely worth the read.
To see the meticulous forensic work, to see the documents laid side by side, it fundamentally changes how you view institutional power.
It reshapes your understanding of how systemic vulnerabilities operate in plain sight, entirely within the bounds of the law.
It really does. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, one that takes this vulnerability into the future. We've seen how fragmented paperwork allows political and financial actors to hide in plain sight today. But what happens when artificial intelligence starts automating how those IRS 990 forms and FEC filings are generated and processed?
Oh, wow.
Right? If we don't fix the architecture of silence now, if we don't mandate that the guards in the vault talk to each other, the machines might just learn to automate the silence, making these systemic blind spots invisible forever.
That is a deeply unsettling but necessary question to ask as these systems evolve.
Until next time, keep looking at the paperwork.